Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by a former federal agent specializing in protective operations and counterterrorism. He spent nearly 20 years in the military and in law enforcement. His assignments took him all over Europe and the Middle East. He's the New York Times and #1 Amazon best-selling author of 13 thrillers, one of which was written for the Robert Ludlum estate, which we're going to discuss then later. Simon's Clayton White series, which I happen to have the first book here, The Last Protector, is presently being adapted for TV by CBS Studios, with Jerry TV producing. His most recent novel, which just came out yesterday, is the ELIAS Network, and yeah, and that's already at the top of the charts. That's right, it's your favorite writer and mine, Simon Gervais. Simon, how
Thanks,
the heck
Robert.
are you?
I'm doing really well, and thanks for having me tonight. It's a real pleasure to speak with you.
I know. I've only, anytime I see you, it's always at a convention or a conference, and you're always busy, busy, drinking some wine, it always seems like. I don't know.
So are you. I mean, these conferences are crazy sometimes.
They
You and
are.
I have been in the business for a decade now, and maybe you've been at it longer than I am, but we've made so many friends over the years that when you see them in New York or at BoucherCon every year, it's kind of you have so many people to talk to that it's hard to sit down and have a conversation with only one or two people at a time. So I'm glad we're actually talking tonight because I know it's always you're going somewhere, I'm going somewhere, never really have the time to chat about stuff.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into it. There's a lot to go over. You've been very, very busy. So it looks like your very first novel, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just going based on your website, because I typically do my research like 50 minutes prior to doing these interviews. Your first novel was A Thick Crimson Line. Is that correct?
It was the Thin Black Line,
A
which was the
thin.
first
Oh,
the thin
okay.
black line, a thick crimson line, I believe it was called, was actually the fourth book in that series.
Oh, you know what? I was probably, when I was looking at it on your website, I was looking at this side instead of going
Right.
this. And regardless, well, when was that one published? Okay, so A Thick Crimson Line was published in 2018. So when was your first novel published?
Yeah, my debut came out in March 2015.
Okay. Now, was that your first published novel, or is that your first your first novel?
It was my first novel. I'm one of the lucky few that got published on my first finished novel. I have to say it took me 7 years to write because I was working for the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at the time. So it really took me 7 years to write it. But yeah, I was very fortunate. I found an agent at Thriller Fest, and it took him about a year to sell my debut. So I guess he sold it in 2014, and then it came out in 2015.
So before you wrote that novel, had you written anything else creatively, like a short story, even a poem, or was it just that was the very first creative thing you had written?
That was the very first creative thing I've ever written. Um, as a police officer, I wrote a lot of reports, and we're talking pages to bring to courts and everything. So these are thick documents. Um, but I've never tried to write fiction before. Having said that, I'm a huge reader. When I was with the service, I read at least one book per week. So that's about 50 books a year. And they were always in that spy thriller genre, military thriller. So I kind of knew how to maybe write it. Like I had no MFA, but when you read so many books, you kind of know how to do it. So I said, I'm going to try my luck and see. And I knew nothing about the business whatsoever when I started. I didn't even know you needed an agent to get published at the time.
So did you had you wanted to be a writer prior to that, or at what point did that really kind of hit you where, oh, I could try this? Was there maybe a specific book or author that really inspired you to give it a try?
Well, it's funny because I think we'll go back to that later in the discussion, but Robert Ludlum was somebody that inspired me to become a writer. When I was young, I remember traveling to Old Orchard Beach with my parents every summer, and my mom stopped by the library and always got me stacks of books that I could read on the beach. And my favorite author was Robert Ludlum. So he introduced me to that magical world of spy thrillers. And then when I was older and I was in the military and in the RCMP, I remember reading pretty much all the Vince Flynn's, the Webb Griffin, Tom Clancy, Brad Thor. They were the big name authors when I started and when I was mid-service in the military and the RCMP. And I really, really enjoyed them. So I guess all these guys kind of, I won't say they push me to write, but it kind of say I want to do the same thing, right? In life, sometimes you look at people and you want to do the same thing they do because you think it's pretty cool. And I thought being a writer was cool, so I tried my hand at it, and I really enjoyed it.
So for people who aren't familiar, can you tell us like your very first series, what inspired like the very first book and really what inspired you to write that particular book and that character? Because of now, correct me if I'm wrong here, you did three books in that series plus a novella.
Correct, that's right. I think like most thriller authors, what inspired me to write it is kind of my own life a little bit, right? It's Mike Walton and his wife, Lisa Walton, are counterterrorism expert. And that's what I used to do for a living before becoming a full-time writer. So I kind of course, like Mike Walton is better at counterterrorism than I ever was, better trained, better shooter and everything. But I kind of base his emotional and his way of life on what I used to do for a living. And of course, Lisa, his wife, was actually based on my wife, whose name is Lizanne. Because I think she was pretty cool. My wife was in the military. I was in the military. We met at the officers' mess in Gagetown, New Brunswick. So I kind of I kind of see, write what you know, and I knew that, and I knew the dynamic between two people in the military. So I wrote about that, and it worked for me.
So with that first book, did you know you were going to do other books, or did you like initially was it going to be just a standalone with maybe it being open-ended so that you could continue the character if need be?
It was a two-book deal because I wanted a two-book deal. My dream when I started in this business was to have like a huge series, only one series, like all these big name authors, like Lee Child, for example, was like, I'm not sure how many books he has, but he has a lot of them all about Jack Reacher. So that was my objective. Having said that, I quickly realized that it's not as easy as you think it is when you start. So it ended up being a four-book series if you include the novella. And I think for a first series, it sold okay. But it was at the time with a smaller publisher, and I felt that he did everything he could, but I felt restrained a little bit. There was maybe not I felt I needed to try something else. So instead of continuing that series with declining sales, I decided to try something else completely. So I took two big leap of faith. I took my first big leap of faith was when I left the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to become a full-time novelist. And the second big leap of faith was when I left that publisher and tried to go somewhere else and write an entirely new series with new characters.
Let's go back though to the first novel. Do you remember like how long did it take you to
Yeah,
write that to finish that first draft?
took me 7 years to finish that first draft. It took me 7 years. I started little by little, and I remember hiring. That's something else that's funny. I hired a freelance editor, and that freelance editor's name was Richard Marek. And unfortunately, he passed away now. But he used to be the editor of Robert Ludlum. He's the one who discovered Robert Ludlum. And I saw that on his bio, and I contacted him. And I told him, I'd like to hire you. Could you please go through my manuscript? I want critique. I want to know what's going on. And he accepted to work with me. And of course, I was very confident about how good my novel was. And when he returned the first draft, I still remember his editorial letter saying that it will never be published. You have no idea what you're doing. It was crushing. It was really
Yeah.
crushing. See, never will this see the light of day. So I took this at art, and I rewrote the entire thing many times. And it was, I think, only, I would say, two or three rewrites later that finally that version saw the light of day or was published.
So what, I mean, like what changes were being made there? Was it just like character choice, scene choice, plot wise? I mean, what specifically, if you look at that first draft to what got published, how different was it?
Well, there's two things I'm going to tell you, two things that I still remember. First of all, one of Richard's critique was like, your main protagonist disappears for 150 pages. You cannot do that. So I said, okay, fair enough. And the other one was you have no idea how to build tension. And taking a step back, it was entirely right. I had no idea. I was putting up too much information at the beginning of the novel. And for me, it sounded good, but for a reader, it didn't work. So it took me a while to understand the concept. But once I understood it, I was able to use his comment and his critique for my other books.
So am I to assume that you don't outline? You're more of a pantser?
All right, I used to be a penciler. When I was writing a book a year, I used to be a penciler. But there's a few times where I got stuck. And I kind of wrote myself in a corner and ended up cutting 20, 25,000 words. And there was a little deadline looming and it stressed me out. And but I always managed to finish on time and deliver on time. Then when I got the Robert Ludlum gig with Putnam, the estate wanted to see a detailed outline before they accepted the book or my idea for the story. And that was my first detailed outline. And my editor at Putnam, the Tom Colgan, loved the outline. Say, wow, this is a really well done outline. Congratulations. So for me, kind of, okay, perfect. I know what I'm doing. And then when I started writing the Blackbriar Genesis, it took me only a few months because my outline was so detailed that I never got lost writing the book. I know exactly where I was going, and it saved me a lot of time. And that year allowed me to write two books on during that year. So nowadays, I always outline, and some of my outlines are quite detailed, they're about 15,000 words, and they take me as long to write than the actual novel once I'm done with the outline.
Yeah, so that was going to be my question. Typically, then with the outline, how long is it taking you to come up with that initial outline? Because I think I remember hearing somewhere Jeffrey Deaver will spend weeks and months typically on his outlines. And then, of course, when he gets and writes the books, he's able to knock that out comparatively quick because, like you said, most of all that stuff is there. So, how long does it take you to come up with that outline?
That's about 2 to 3 months. And yeah, about 2, 3 months to write a 15,000 word outline, and about then I can write the book between 6 and 10 weeks, depending how complicated it is. But yeah, that's about right.
Are there any times where you find yourself actually in the middle of the book finding that, oh, you know what? The outline says I should go this direction, but the characters are pulling me this direction? Or do you just stick straightly to that outline?
Very rarely, because these thoughts, these doubts come when I do the outline. When I'm done with the outline, I know this is where I'm going. Having said that, I realize that the beginning of my book usually take longer than it is on the outline. So let's say I'm thinking about writing 1 or 2 chapters, and sometimes it turns out it's going to be 6 chapters. So the only thing I'm going to modify in the outline is I'm going to cut stuff that I feel are not needed, because I'm going to end up with a too big of a book.
Yeah.
Um, so I found ways to do that, but I'm never really going to change the direction of the character that I have already established when I'm writing the outline.
So yeah, so the Robert Ludlum estate, you did write the one novel for them. How did that how well, let's say how did that come about? But first of all, like where were you in your career already? Like how many other books? Because I believe you had already had those books out with Thomas and Mercer, at least that first trilogy, correct?
Yeah, I think I was actually even done with The Last Protector. I think I think it was in 2021. I was or 2020, um, probably 2021. And Thomas and Mercer was only at the time able to publish one of my book per year. And I sent an email to Tom Colgan, who I had become friend with over the years. And I know I've always wanted to work with him, and I think it was the same for him. And I sent him an email saying, "Listen, I just finished my book. I have time. I know that you already have terrific writers writing the Tom Clancy, the Ludlum, the Webb Griffin. But if there's ever a spot, keep me in mind. I'd love to do that." And I expected to hear from him maybe a month later or something, but within hours, Tom replied and say, "Simon, oh my God, I cannot believe you sent me this email tonight because there's a project that landed in my lap and I thought about you." So stay tuned. I cannot share more with you right now, but I'll get back to you shortly. And of course, a few weeks later, he said, "Listen, there's a new project that Robert Ludlum estate would like to do something else within the Jason Bourne universe. Would you be interested?" So, of course, I was interested because, as I explained to you earlier, Robert Ludlum is was my literary hero. So, for me to step into this Jason Bourne universe was a blessing. It was one of the biggest honor of my career.
Yeah. So that process, you write, I mean, like how much was given to you in terms of, I guess, the story idea? How much was more your idea? I mean, can you kind of talk a little bit more about that process of how that came about?
Yeah, I can talk about the process for the Blackbriar Genesis. I'm not sure what it is for the Tom Clancy or the other books that Tom's working with co-writing
Right.
on writing. But for me, Tom gave me one sentence. He said, "What if a Treadstone agent was killed in Prague, but Treadstone didn't know he was there?" That was like the line he gave me. And he said, "You can do whatever you want with it. It's an idea, but I want you to create something else." So we created Blackbriar, which appeared in one of the Jason Bourne. It's one of the files, like another secret government organization within the Jason Bourne universe. And I think I was very lucky because I was given carte blanche to write within the Jason Bourne universe. And I wrote a book that, as a fan, I wanted to read. A book that connect Treadstone and Jason Bourne together with Blackbriar in the middle. And that's what I did. I still think it's one of my best book. I'm actually a big fan still of all the Robert Ludlum's book, and I think Blackbriar Genesis fits perfectly with these two series.
So when you wrote that novel, did you feel compelled at all to try to match Ludlum's writing style, or were you encouraged just to write your style? Because I believe like Brian Andrews had said that when he and Jeff wrote the one Griffin book, they were basically told just write your style, don't try to copy that style. I mean, like well, yeah, like what was that actual writing process like?
It was exactly the same thing for me. Tom said, "Write a Simon Gervais book for Robert Ludlum. Don't try to do Robert Ludlum's writing." And honestly, I'm glad because I would not have been capable of doing such a thing. As you probably know, like I'm a French Canadian. I speak in French, but I write in English. So for me to use Robert Ludlum terminology, and he's kind of he's a thriller writer, but slash poet at the same time. Sometimes when you read his book, they're really well written. So and his voice is very different as well. So I wanted to write something under my own voice, but that fitted with the Jason Bourne universe, that fitted with the books that Brian Freeman was writing and Joshua Hood was writing. I wanted to fit right in, but putting my own spin on it.
So that's fascinating. So you're saying that you think in French, but you write in English?
right? Like the only time I speak in English is when I do interviews like this, or sometimes I live in Ottawa, so we do speak in English, but at home and my family, it's mostly French. We only speak French. Like I used to speak English quite a bit when I was working with the RCMP when I was in the military, but nowadays I actually barely speak English. Having said that, I read in English all the time. All the books that I read are in English. I write in English, and I know I watch TV shows in English as well.
So when you wrote your first novel, though, did you write that in English, or were you or was it in French, or were you tempted to try to write it in French and then translate it, or?
I've never been tempted to write in French because I wanted to understand the market. And the market is in the United States, it's in England, it's in Australia, it's English Canada. If I wrote it in French, it would have been like writing with handcuffs because the market is very, very small where I live in Quebec. It's only one of the provinces in Canada. It's the only one that speaks French. So I didn't want to be restrained. I wanted to go big. I wanted to go for an American market. So I
Well,
always wrote in English.
yeah, I mean, to be clear, what I meant was just like a first draft, write it in kind of your, I guess we would call it your native tongue. And then, once you had that, you could then translate. I don't know. I mean, like I wasn't saying like write a book that was set in Canada or whatever else, but I meant just like, you know, like it always fascinates me for certain authors. There's one author, her name escapes me right now. She's a very famous literary author. Um, she's American, but she lives in I believe Italy now. So like she writes her stories in Italian and then translates them into English, and then that's how they get published.
That, wow, that's interesting. But writing in English come easily for me. Speaking not that much, but writing comes very easily. It's what I do. I find it easier to write in English than to write in French. And what you're saying is that I have a friend like that as well that you might have met at Thriller Fest or BoucherCon. His name is Ethan Cross. So Ethan Cross is a huge name in Germany. We're talking million plus book, and he only writes in English. And then his publisher is a German publisher. They translate everything. They publish it in German. So I know it happens like that because he doesn't speak German at all, but I don't think it would have worked for me though. It would have been very difficult to achieve this.
Yeah, interesting. So, man, what was I going to ask you? Um, well, going then to your second series, for people who aren't aware, what's that series about?
Pearson series. It's about a DEA agent, that was undercover with a drug cartel, and he fell in love with the daughter of the chief, and he lost everything because in the end he's still a DEA agent, and he arrested the father, so he's kind of broke up with his girlfriend. His daughter is upset. So it's really about them reuniting a few years later when their daughter is kidnapped. And he's going to go scorch earth to try to find her. So it's a very action-packed series. Not that much like spy, but mostly military series, just high action, high intensity for the whole series. So it's three books. It starts with On Them Down, which really was my breakthrough novel back in 2019, followed by Train to Hunt and then Time to Hunt.
Right. So there are three novels in the Clayton White series so far, three novels and a novella in your first series. I mean, do you have ideas for any fourth books in any of those series, or do you feel that, they're good as trilogies or like
I think they're
or
good as trilogies. I'm not closing the door on writing more, but right now I'm contracted for the next 2 years with other series and other work that I have planned. And both series, I know you mentioned Jerry Bruckheimer and CBS for the Clayton White series, but I have also the Pearson series, like that started with Hunt Them Down, that's also being adapted by another company. And I think we might see more of Pearson than Clayton White, but for now, I'm really focusing on my new Caspian Anderson series and the series I'm co-writing with Ryan Stack.
Do any of your novels are they all in their separate universes, or is there potential for crossover for any of these characters?
No, they're really their different universe. And I think this is something important as well for thriller writers because you want to own more than one IP. Let's say these guys were all in the same universe. Somebody that's optioning the rights of that series, that buying the rights of that series for TV adaptation, they own the entire IP. It's going to be really difficult for your film agent to negotiate separate IPs because these worlds are interconnected. My world are completely separate. You can, there's no different president of the United States, different characters. There's nothing that can cross over from one series to the next.
Right. So the most recent novel, can you tell us what that one's about?
Yeah, the ELIAS network, it's really a high octane political thriller, and it kind of blends espionage with emotional intrigue. I wanted to be different from my other series where betrayal and sacred trust played a bigger role. So my protagonist, Caspian Anderson, is an elite assassin, is an assassin for the US government, and but his facade as a UN translator. And he's sent on a mission to Zermatt in Switzerland to kill a banker that's associated or linked to a human organ trafficking ring. So he uncovers a conspiracy, but what he doesn't know is that his girlfriend, Lizelle Bergman, is also a spy, and she has her own deadly mission to accomplish. And neither one of them know the other's true identity. So both of their operation are on a collision course. So at some point they have to make the decision: is that do we take our enemy or do we let our mistrust bring us down? So this is like the setup for the ELIAS network. So it's really a political thriller, spy thriller, and it's a lot of it happened in Switzerland and in New York.
Like with the other books that you've done series, do you have when you initially start out with book one, do you already have an idea of what book two is going to be, a potential book three? Like how far into a series do you already have plan in your head, or maybe you make notes and keep notes, throughout?
I usually start at least with two books because when I sell my books to my publisher, I try to get two book deals so I know I'm able to plan ahead. So for the Elias Network, I knew that I wanted to do at least three books. So my series are really usually planned for trilogy, but I always have an idea for book four. So what I did last week is that I pitched the third book and the Caspian series that I know my publisher is interested in. And I also submitted an idea for book four. But these are like more like book teaser. They're not full outline. They're 1 or 2 pages, and it kind of go through what would happen if in these books. But usually I'd say when I start a series, I know where I'm going for at least three books.
Um, Interesting. So how would you say your writing then has evolved since your very first novel? Obviously, we talked about how your very first draft more or less had to be trashed. It took a couple drafts before you had the finished result. What, like, I don't know, like, have you, like, if you could go back to, 15 years ago or however long it was when you started writing that first book, is there any advice you would want to, have your young self know before you sat down and started writing that first draft?
It's hard to tell because it was a long journey. It took me a while to become successful in this business. It took me a full like 5 years, I'd say. Um, But at the same time, I enjoyed every step of the way. I celebrated every milestone, getting an agent, getting my first publishing deal, getting that first book published, um, getting my first review, getting my first trade review after that. So there's nothing that I regret. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the journey, and I've learned so much. And I think that if I was to go back 15 years, I say just trust yourself and trust the process because it's going to work. And that's what I did. And I'm really happy to be where I am right now. But I don't think I would skip any of the part that I had to go through to be where I am right now.
Yeah. I remember what I wanted to ask you before. You had mentioned before in your previous day job, basically having to write reports a lot. And I imagine those reports had to be very, very detailed and probably also tight. And I think I remember hearing Michael Connolly talk about how his work as a journalist made it so that when he was writing, he was very good, writing quickly, writing on deadline because he would have to do that as a reporter. Do you feel that previous day job have reporting report taking and everything else that really helped you in a way when you started writing the fiction, or maybe it had no bearing?
I don't think the report writing helped that much. What did help though, is my capacity or my ability to deal with stress and deadline. For me, even though like I want to be successful in everything that I do, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's writing, if it's investing, I want to be successful at what I do. So I take it to heart and I always give my 100%. But I understand that we're writing. I'm an entertainer, right? I write for my readers. And if I miss a chapter or I miss a book, I get some bad reviews. You know what? Nobody's gonna stepping on a mine and losing a leg. So that kind of helped me pull through some of the hard time I had as a writer because I compare myself to people that are deployed overseas, and I'm like, okay, my job is easy. It was the same thing when I was looking for agent and publisher, and I was always telling myself, if they say no, so what? Just keep going because nobody's gonna die, nobody's losing their homes because of that. So that was the process, and being an high intensity job in the RCMP and the military helped me going through that and looking at it at a different angle.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about research. I mean, obviously you have a certain background. A lot of your characters fall within that background because, like you had mentioned before, you wanted to essentially write what you knew. So, I mean, how much are you doing in research? Like, so I was on a panel, or actually, I had to moderate a panel at BoucherCon, basically about writing action. And one of the questions I had asked the panel was, like, how much do you let research get in the way of your story or action? Because obviously you want to be accurate in what you write, but I think there are times where writers kind of feel sometimes like, oh, I spent all this time researching this one thing. I don't want to, I don't want to like have all that, it doesn't really fit in the book, but I still spent all this time, so I want to like squeeze it in. I don't know, like, yeah, like how do you like approach the whole research aspect?
Well, research is very different for me because it happens while I'm doing the outline. When I'm done the outline, I'm actually writing the book, the research is done. So for me, the first step is to find a good idea. And to find a good idea, I usually travel to a spot. This is usually where I go for my summer vacation is where my next book's going to take place, or at least good part of it. So Zermatt, because I went skiing there with my family, and Elias Enigma, my book that's coming out in 2025. Some of it happens in Africa because that's where we were with my family. We were in Africa for 3 weeks. I'm writing a book that's going to take place in Mallorca because this is where our family vacation was this summer. So for me, just walking the street, sometimes it can be as boring as going to a cafe and looking around. It gives me idea. I walk the street of Venice in Italy, and I'm going to say, okay, somebody's going to jump from that window. And I take notes. I have a notebook, I have my phone, and I make notes, and it gives me story ideas. So it's all over the place in my notes. But then when I sit down to write the outline, I take all the good ideas that I had on the spot where I was, and I create a story base from that. So I travel to find my ideas, and I read the newspaper. I'm a big news junkie. I spend at least an hour a day reading all sort of news. And I think this is where my ideas come from. As for the tactics in my book, I try to make them as realistic as possible. Of course, I take some liberties, But I use that. My own background was when in this field, so I don't have to call a lot of friends when it comes to the tactics because I kind of understand surveillance, counter surveillance, the shooting, small unit tactics, reconnaissance. I kind of know it. I understand that the tactics have changed since I left in 2014, but still I have a basic good knowledge of what readers need to read on the page to make it realistic.
Some of your fellow thriller writers who have military backgrounds always have to go through like a clearance process. Is that something that you have to do, or does Canada have any type of thing, maybe not for yourself, but maybe other people in military service, where if they want to, write a fiction book, they have to kind of go through a clearance process with the government before it gets published?
Yeah, I had to do that when I was in the service for my first book because I wrote it while I was still in the RCMP, so I had to clear this one. After that, I did sign when I left for some operation that I took part on NDA. I think that's for 25 years. I cannot talk about those operations of those tactics. But apart from that, I'm not like other of my American friends that need to go through what you just suggested. But for me, no. Of course, I cannot talk about a certain operation that would still be sensible, but apart from that, I can do pretty much what I want.
Yeah. So you mentioned The Last Protector and the Clayton White series is currently, I mean, is that in production right now, or is it still kind of in the option phase?
Well, it's in the option phase, but it's so we have Gerald Bruckheimer Television producing it, CBS Studio that would be making it. Now, what we're trying to find is a network or a streamer that's actually
Hmm.
going to produce it with them. Um, so I think we don't have any green light yet. It might take a long time. It might never happen, but I've come to know the team at Bruckheimer quite well in the last year, and they are terrific. And if there's a team that can bring this to the screen, it's going to be with them. I read the script and the pitch for the first season, and it's just terrific. It's big, it's bold, it's action, it's sexy. It's like full on Bruckheimer television. So I'm really, really proud to be associated with them, and I have a very good relationship with the entire team.
Do you how involved are you so far? Is it mostly just, you're just the author, it's by, or like are you any like, co-producer, you know what I mean? Like are you giving feedback on the scripts, or yeah, like I mean, like what's your level of involvement at least so far?
I'm very lucky. I'm very involved with that. I was able to see the pitch and what they're doing for the first season ahead of them going out with it. I'm going to be consulting on every episode. I'm going to look at pretty much everything. I am sure I won't have a word about casting, though. They're all professional. They know what they're doing. But one of the first creative meeting I had with them, they told me we want to do the book justice and we want to make this a realistic show. So that's why we want you involved so you can help us make that happen. So I think I'm going to be pretty involved. I've been quite involved for the last year and a half, and I think the next year is going to be busy as well.
So how close are they sticking so far to the series? Or, sometimes TV has to kind of go in their own direction. And I guess how do you feel about that as the author? That if something, starts straying and maybe they start adding in or have characters do things that don't necessarily happen in the books that they do. Because that is, I mean, going back to Ludlum, I mean, look at the very first Jason Bourne movie, nothing like the very first Jason Bourne novel. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that and the same thing too with the other series? Some authors I feel like are very precious when it comes to their books, and other authors are essentially like, well, the book is the book, movies, TV are their own thing. If it changes, it changes. It's not a big deal.
I'm not precious at all, and that's something I wanted to make clear with the team as well. They know their market. I know my market, right? And the industry, the book, my publisher, and I know who I'm writing for. They want to adapt my book. They know their market. They have their own numbers. They have their own data. So they can modify the book as they see fit. Of course, I don't think like I've seen what they want to do with it, and that's something I'm going to stand behind. And I will be very, very proud if it goes like that to the world. I think the screenwriter that did it did a fantastic job. He nailed it. It's something that I can be very, very proud of. But no, I don't want to be someone that's going to be difficult to work with. I want the project to be made. I want to help them make it as realistic as possible. But of course, when you sell your rights and you work for a team, I'm no longer the person who decides what's going to happen. I'm only one of the voice among a bigger team. So, and I know where I stand in the pyramid. I'm not at the top. I'm very fortunate they're listening to my comments. They take it at heart. But in the end, when they have the rights, they can do pretty much whatever they want. But you know, so far I have nothing to complain about.
Yeah. So going back just to your writing process, so you spent all this time working on an outline, and then you actually write the book. Like in a day, do you have when you're actually writing the manuscript, do you try to do like a chapter a day, so many thousand words? I mean, is there or I mean, yeah, just what's your overall writing process?
And for me, it's word counting, really, because I realize that sometimes I'm starting the novel. I know where I'm going because my outline is done, but I have only 8 weeks or 6 weeks left. So it's all about word counts, and I feel that for me the sweet spot is between 2,000 and 3,500 words a day. Is my sweet spot, is where I'm comfortable. It's easy for me to do because I have my outline. When I didn't have my outline and I was pensing, getting to even 1,000 words, a good 1,000 word a day was extremely difficult. So outlining helped me in the writing process, so I can go a lot faster right now.
Right, but how about the process in terms of the write or the outline? Because you said that the outline will take you quite a while. So,
Mhm.
like, are you working? Because how many books are you doing now a year on average?
Let's say 1 and 3 every 2 years, so 1.5.
So one and a half. So are there times where you are working like in the morning, you're working on an outline for book X, while then in the afternoon or evening you're writing a chapter or two of book Y? I mean, are there times where
Right.
you're doing two projects at the same time, or you try to keep everything separate?
So, so I try to keep everything separate, but now that I said that, I'm working on two projects right now. So it's kind of it's different. But usually I try to keep my projects separate. When I do the outline, I don't have specific hours. It's when the idea come. I work organically. I'm gonna write an idea, and then I'm gonna have something before, something after. It's not. I don't start at the beginning and I go to the end. It's really I write a bunch of idea, dialogue, twists that I don't know where I'm gonna put. I'm gonna write that on my Word document. And the further along I go, then I know exactly where I'm going to place it. So that whole process take months. And I don't have specific hours I'm going to work on a day. I'm much more at ease. I don't have a straight schedule. But when the writing starts, when I'm like, as I said, 2 months before deadline, and I'm starting to actually write the novel, then I can write 16 hours a day. I'm just gonna go and I want to get it done because the last thing I want to do is to be late. I don't want to be somebody that's going to deliver the manuscript late because I know I have an entire team behind me, and you know that too. That's waiting for you. So if I miss that deadline, it's going to screw up a lot of people down the line. So I don't want to do that.
Right.
So I try to give my book on time, and I'm going to work as many hours as needed to accomplish the mission. Sorry, to
So,
finish. I apologize.
oh yeah, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I said accomplish the mission. I mean,
Oh,
finish.
okay. Yeah, no. So, in the green room, we were talking briefly. You have coming up. You're collaborating on. Is this the first time you're collaborating on a novel?
Yeah, it's first time that I did writing for the estate, but that was
Right.
me and me only. Now I'm co-writing a book with Ryan Stack. So this is really something, a project that we do together.
And can you talk at all about that? I think I remember seeing it announced, and I know that you might not want to talk about too much, but is there a little like tease you can give people?
It's going to be something they've never seen before. The twists in that book are huge. I'm really proud of where we came. We had this first idea in November 2023. And by April, we had 50 pages written and a full outline, like a 15,000 word outline. And I know there was a lot of interest, but I wanted to show it to Thomas and Mercer first. And my longtime editor, who I think is brilliant, Liz Pearsons, bought it in a two-book deal in a preempt. So Ryan and I are thrilled. Thomas and Mercer, I've been with them since 2018 now, and I couldn't be more happy. And I just think it's a good mix of me and Ryan. And one of the nice compliment I had about it is when Liz read the outline, she told me we cannot figure out if it's you or Ryan that wrote it. So it's really got a good mix of both of us. I think it's the best of us in the novel right now.
Yeah, that was gonna
And
be my other question in terms of just how are you guys blending your writing styles so that it's not specifically sometimes when you read books, by two authors, they're a little bit lazy about it and you can tell like, okay, this chapter was obviously written by, this person and this other chapter was written by this person. How are you guys going about blending that so it's pretty flawless throughout?
well, I don't want to go into our secret sauce. So that Ryan and I have our own process that's working really well for us right now. But I think our readers, my fans and his fans, are going to be thrilled with the result. And the book is pretty much done. It's due on November 1st. We're editing it right now. And yeah, it's going to go to Liz on November 1st, and then we're going to start working on the second one. And the title for that first book is going to be The Second Son. Um, yeah, and I'm really, it's going to come out probably in November of 2025.
So are readers going to be lost if they don't read the first Son first? We got jokes here. We got jokes here, Simon. So what are you like? What are you currently writing? Or not right, God. What are you currently reading? Like, yeah, I mean, are like you had mentioned before about the books you were reading? Are you? I imagine you're probably still reading those same authors. But like, what are you just currently like in the past week or two? Is there anything that you've been reading that you've been really enjoying?
I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and right now you'll laugh. What I've been listening to in my car, I've been doing that with my wife. I've been listening to Emily Henry Happy Place, which is a rom-com,
Yeah.
completely different from what I write. Um, And my next one that I'm going to start tomorrow is my friend David McCloskey, The Seventh Floor. I'm a big fan of David. He's an ex-CIA analyst. His first book, Damascus Station, was a hit. Moscow Hicks, that came out last year, was, in my opinion, even better. It was one of the best book I read in 2023. And The Seventh Floor came out yesterday, at the same time as the Elias Network. And I'm just very much looking forward to reading this one.
Yeah, I mean, the Emily Henry thing. I mean, I'm not laughing. I think it's great when writers are reading outside of their preferred genre or the genre that they write in. I always encourage other writers that if you really want to stretch your writing chops or your legs when it comes to being a good writer, you can't just keep writing the same or reading the same genre that that you write in because I don't know. I just think it's really good to just have that diversity to read other genres. You'll stumble across certain things that you might pick up in those other books that will inspire you in your own writing, even when it comes to maybe a real writing style or whatever else. So no, absolutely. Is it good though?
I think it was fantastic. We had a good time. We laughed quite a bit. And I especially enjoyed, and I've learned a lot, the romantic banter on a light rom-com, or it's not maybe not a light rom-com, but it's just maybe a rom-com. Um, I've learned a lot about the banter between the two main protagonists. I think it was very funny. It was well done, and there's a reason why she's so successful. And
Yeah.
I'm going to read another one of her for sure. I'm going to try to alternate between thriller and rom-com just because I seem to enjoy it and I can listen to them with my wife in the car. So it's great. And another book that I listened to recently is it's now you might laugh, but I listened to my own book, the ELIAS Network on audio, because I was in France last month with my wife. We were touring the wine region of France, and my narrator, Graham, lives in Paris, and he saw one of my posts on social media, and he sent me a text and said, "Hey, by the way, I don't want to interrupt, but if you're in Paris for a few nights, would you like to meet up?" And my wife and I jumped on the opportunity. We spent a wonderful evening with him in Paris, drinking wine, eating cold cuts, and everything. It was just great. He's a fantastic guy, and he did a terrific job with the audio edition of the Elias Network.
Yeah. No, I mean that's great. I definitely think authors should also listen to audiobooks. There are times where I might be reading a book or listening to an audiobook by a writer who I feel like it's clear they don't listen to audiobooks because of like the overuse of speech tags or whatever else. It's like they just are not really, especially because audio has become such a huge market that it's
Um,
something that oftentimes if you look on Audible, you'll just see people complaining about, X or Y or whatever else. And it's definitely a market that you have to, if you want to be as successful, you can't dismiss audio.
no, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm not sure what are the percentage of my cell in audio, but I can tell you that over the years they have picked up quite a bit, and I hope it's going to continue. I enjoy reading. I'm consuming more books since I started listening to audiobooks because it's just easier. You can drive to the cottage for 2 hours and you're going to listen to a book like in 2, 3 weekends. It's done. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad it's picking up. And at BoucherCon, actually, I met a lot of great narrators, and they have their own little ecosystem as well. And it was a lot of fun talking to them about it.
So the most recent book is the Elias Network. What's the name of the second book and when does that come out?
The second book in the series is going to be it's called The Elias Enigma, and it's going to come out July 8th, 2025. So it's going to be a big summer book.
So is that the brand for the series? The third book will be the Elias something?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
All of my
And
series have been like that since the beginning. Like the first
yeah.
series was Thin Black Line. After that, there's always the word line. Then it's Hunt. And then The Last Protector, The Last Sentinel, The Last Guardian. And now it's going to be Elias and all of the book of the series.
And then obviously you have the book with Ryan that you're doing. Is there anything in the future that like you're already cooking up? I mean, I understand you can't really like talk about it, but I mean, do you have something in mind?
Well, we got a two-book deal. Me and Ryan and I got a two-book deal for that. I have the Elias Enigma coming in July. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a third book and the Caspian Anderson series. And then that's keeping me busy for the next 2 years, plus the adaptation on TV. So for me, that's all the project I can handle at the same time right now.
All right, very good. Simon, is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to discuss?
No, not at all. I think it was a great discussion. I cannot believe it's been an hour already.
I know
Um,
I try to keep them pretty short. I mean, I never really want to go longer because I know people have, short attention spans. So we don't want to go longer than an hour show on TV. So, yeah. So the author is Simon Gervais. Most recent book, the Elias Network, coming to TV soon. Fingers crossed. Is this the Clayton White series? It looks like. Hold on, we have a comment here. The book sound. Oh, Krista is in the comments. She says the book sounds good. Yep, definitely. Oh, that's another thing too, Simon. Where can people find your books?
they can find their books pretty much anywhere, but the best place and the best price for my books, Thomas Mercer, is, I would say, it's Amazon. They always have a special going on. You can get the audiobooks there as well, the paperback. It's easy. It's the best place, but of course you can go to the local store or Barnes and Noble, but you might want to order them ahead.
And then online, where can people find you if they want to follow you
I'm
on
on
social?
gervaisbooks.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook and X as well. So
Yeah.
feel free to
We
reach out.
we call it Twitter on this program,
Ah,
so
Twitter,
that's
X,
that's
Twitter.
that's okay. So again, Simon, thank you so much for hanging out. Everybody, go check out Simon's books. Literally, the most recent book just came out yesterday. I'm sure right now it's in top 100. Is it in top 100 in all the countries, all the major countries? I
Yes,
hate to say major countries, but you know what I mean.
yeah. Well, at least it's in the US, the biggest market. I think this morning it was at 23 overall. So it's been doing terrific and number one in so many categories. So I'm really, really pleased with how it's going.
Awesome. All right. Again, Simon, thank you for hanging out. Everyone else, we will see you next time. Bye.
Perfect.